So I got a question about this video, and I want to make sure that I explain it, but I'm not entirely sure I understand the question. The question was, I have Q1 equals 0 and Q0 equals 1 and F equals 0 when B equals 1, and why wouldn't Q0 also change to 0? And I think the answer is because when we get these values, we're not using that B equals 1 yet, because you have to use the value that was there before the clock changed, because these are the values that you get right when the clock changes. So B does not equal 1 right here, B equals 0. And so since B equals 0, Q0 is not going to change, because it's been sitting here with 0 as the entry into the T flip-flop. When the clock changes, B becomes 1, but that's not going to be reflected in your value for Q0 until the next clock cycle. So let me see what happens here. Let's do that. Let's go ahead and finish filling this out. So now I can put the 1 in, but I don't change. I put in my values of Q from here. So Q0 was 1. So Q0 bar is 0. So that's 0. Okay, so in general, when I say I want the values that I get on the flip-flop, so if this is a T flip-flop, and let's say my input T equals 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and Q is initially 0. So Q is initially 0. And I want to know what are my values on each successive entry. So when I start, I have Q equals 0, and I have so when I start, I have my value of T is 0, and then at the next clock cycle I'll look to see, so that's there, but I didn't change anything. This was given. And then on the next clock cycle I look to see, well, what was T before? And before T was 0, so that means no change. So Q is 0, and then I can read T off my list here is 0. Now on my next clock cycle, Q is going to look at what T was the time before. It was 0, so Q doesn't change, and T becomes 1. On the next clock cycle, you look at what T was before. T was 1, so it toggles, so it becomes 1, and T is 1. And then on the next clock cycle, you look at what T was. It was 1, and so Q toggles and becomes 0, and T is now 0. And then on the next clock cycle, you look at what T was before. It was 0. We have 0, and that's the end. And so our last one, we don't have another T value. That's all we have. So see if that helps explain things.